Pleasure. It is a privilege to be able to introduce to you the next President of the United States of America, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank all of those people who are outside. And let me begin by thanking Sam Liebert and Bruce Penny and Judy Robson and Ben Pollack and Marcos Arroyo for their very generous introductions. And let me thank the UAW for allowing us to use their beautiful facilities today. I grew up, I am very proud to be a senator from the great state of Vermont, and today we're not going to have an argument about whose cheddar cheese is better. I fully concede this country has great cheddar cheese, with taste Vermont cheddar cheese as well. But I am proud to represent Vermont in the Senate, but I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. We've got a Brooklyn right now. And I grew up in a rent-controlled apartment, 3.5-room apartment in Brooklyn. My dad came to this country at the age of 17 without speaking English, with no money, and he never made a lot of money, but he was a very proud American because he was able to raise his family in the United States of America, and his kids were able to go to college. And you never saw an American who was prouder than he was. But I grew up and learned economics, not in college, but I learned economics by growing up in a family that did not have a lot of money. And I know what lack of money means in terms of stress in the family and very difficult choices that have to be made. That is a lesson I learned as a kid, and it is a lesson that I will never forget for my entire life. And that is that all over our country today, families are struggling, they're making difficult choices. And if elected President of the United States, my main goal is to create an economy that works for all of our people and not just the 1%. I want to say a thank you to the men and women here in the UAW and other trade unions and trade unionists around this country. I think it is not widely known, media doesn't talk about it terribly much, but in many ways it has been the trade union movement in this country that gave us a middle class.
Yeah.
And in a sense, what this campaign is about is building on what the union movement has done. You know, 100+ years ago, workers in this country were treated like animals. People sometimes were forced to work 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. Kids were working in factories. And what workers did under tremendous pressure and with great bravery, what they said is, hey, you know, we're human beings. We're not beasts of burden here. We need to be treated with dignity. We need to have some rights. You can't fire us arbitrarily for no reason. And we are going to stand together and we're going to form unions. And I see this as places named after Walter Reuther, and we all remember that photograph of Reuther being beaten up by goons from Ford, I think it was. But how many workers were beaten? How many workers thrown in jail fighting to make sure that working people in this country were treated with respect and treated with dignity. Now I understand that you have a governor here who is trying to destroy the trade union movement. Well, I've got some bad news for him. And that is, if elected President of the United States, we're going to do everything that we can to rebuild the trade union movement. be a strong middle class. We're going to pass legislation that will make it easier for workers to join unions. If 50% of the workers in a bargaining unit plus one vote to sign a card to join a union, they will have a union. If a company refuses to negotiate a first contract with that union, that company will be severely penalized. A lot of people don't understand this, but when workers negotiate good contracts for their members, it impacts every worker in the community because wages go up for everybody. In my 25 years in Congress, I have a 98% AFL-CIO voting record. And I'm not sure that I was the guy who was wrong on that 2%. So I am not a candidate who goes to the unions and goes to workers and leaves and goes to a fundraiser with Wall Street. You are my family. And I have worked with unions for my entire life and with working people. That is what this campaign is about. That's what I've been about my whole life. So thank you all very much for what you have done. In fighting for the rights of working people, there is nothing more important than that. Now, when you want to think about the kind of administration Bernie Sanders would have, kind of think about Scott Walker in reverse. Walker wants to destroy trade unionism. I want to build trade unionism. Here is another issue, and it's an issue that I would hope that people who may disagree with me or you on a number of points will agree with us on. Democracy is not a complicated idea. It really is not. It's a pretty simple idea. And that is, you got to vote, and you got to vote, and you got to vote. And you vote for whatever you want. You want to vote for me, great. You want to vote against me, great. Disagree with me, that's okay. That's called democracy. But democracy is not about denying people the right to vote, suppressing the vote. That's not democracy. This is the absolute truth. I've run for office in the state of Vermont many, many times. I've lost some, and I've won more. But it has never occurred to me, you know, like every state, we got areas in the state where you do better and areas in the state you do worse. It has never occurred to me for 1 second, everywhere, that I would try to figure out a way to make it harder for people to vote because they might vote against me. My idea has been to try to convince people with my ideas. And if I can't convince them, fine, they vote against me. If I lose an election, that's called democracy. But that we have Governor Walker and Republican governors all over this country working overtime, trying to suppress the vote. Can you believe that? Trying to make it harder for old people to get to the polls, or young people, or people of color, or working people. That is a cowardly, un-American act. And I really say to Governor Walker and the many other Republican governors who are trying to suppress the vote, that if you cannot participate, if you're not comfortable participating in free, fair, and open elections, get out of politics, get another job. And all of you know that the United States has one of the lowest voter turnout rates of any major country on earth. Our job is to get more people into the political process, not to make it harder. And if elected president, I will do my best to pass legislation to make sure that everybody in this country who is 18 years of age or older has the right to vote End of discussion. Now, Governor Walker apparently believes that it is a great idea to give tax breaks to large, profitable corporations and to cut education. Well, I believe it is a lot better idea to expand funding for education and demand that large, profitable corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. Governor Walker thinks it's pretty tough and pretty brave not to accept the Affordable Care Act's expansion of Medicaid, denying some 120,000 people in Wisconsin the right to have health insurance. I'm not so impressed. You got poor people, some of them have never had health insurance in their lives, not being able to get the health insurance that the federal government, Congress passed. Some of those people will die because they can't get to a doctor when they should. Others will suffer unnecessarily because they can't get to a doctor. So I would say to Governor Walker and all of those other Republican governors who have rejected the expansion of Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, get beyond your right-wing ideology and do the human thing, the moral thing, and the right thing. Give people the health insurance that they need. I was elected to Congress in the House from Vermont in the early 1990s. And from almost the first day that I was elected, I understood that the trade agreements being proposed, NAFTA and then CAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China, were going to be a disaster for working people. And over those years, I worked very closely with the trade unions, trying to do everything that we could to defeat them. I remember back in the early 1990s being on the picket line in opposition to NAFTA. Now, these trade agreements really are not complicated. You don't need a PhD in economics to figure them out. Number one, they were written by corporate America to benefit corporate America. And what they are about, very simple. Corporate America sits up there and they say, well, why do I want to pay a worker here in Janesville or anyplace else in America a living middle-class wage, 20, 30 bucks an hour, whatever it may be? Why do I want to provide health insurance? Why do I want to obey environmental regulations? Why do I want to have to negotiate with the union? Why do I want to do all of those things when it would be much simpler to shut down here in Janesville, go to Mexico, go to wherever, and then pay people pennies an hour in another country and then bring my product right back into America? That's what they wanted to do. That was the plan behind these trade agreements. And that is, in fact, exactly what has happened. As a result of NAFTA, as a result of permanent normal trade relations with China and other trade agreements, we have lost millions of decent paying jobs in this country. Thousands and thousands of corporations have shut their plants down, thrown American workers out on the street, and have gone to low wage countries. That is not free trade. That is not fair trade. That is not the type of trade policies that we should have or we should continue. If elected President of the United States, we are going to totally transform our trade policies, make them work for working people, not just the CEOs of large corporations.